Welcome, everyone. We are excited to present to you today. My name is Morgan Hudson. I'm Associate Teacher and Associate Department Chair at Creekview High School in the Cherokee County School District.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dr. Lydia Ellen Lauchella. I'm the Assistant Director of our Center for Innovative Teaching and Engaged Learning here at Reinhardt University, and I specialize in first-year seminars. All right, so we'd like to begin our presentation with some discussion questions. So if you could take a moment to pause this slide after we introduce the questions and scan the QR code and put your responses in. So the first question we'd like you to answer is, what do you think of when you think of a learning community?
And the next question is, have you ever taught in or been a student in a learning community? If so, what kind of impact did it have on you? So that is what we are going to talk about today is learning communities. And for me, I have a personal experience with learning communities because I was in one. When I was in college, I went to Kennesaw State University for my undergraduate studies, and I was in the learning community called Presidency Emerging Global Scholars Program, also known as PEGS. And there's a picture of us in Costa Rica. And this learning community was very unique. For me, especially as a freshman, it had a first-year travel experience attached to it, an international travel experience. And our first year went to Brazil, and then in our second year, we went to Costa Rica. And for me, going to KSU, it's a pretty large school, and it was a big pond, and I felt like a very little fish going there. And this learning community was somewhere I could go. It was a experience for me that I could bring back and have friends as we started out, and it was just a really awesome experience for us to be able to have that as a freshman in college, and something that sets me apart from others as freshmen.
Thank you for sharing some of your experience with that. It's interesting, Morgan and I's paths never crossed, but I actually taught in a couple learning communities, designed some learning communities at KSU before I came to Reinhardt as well. One of the learning communities I designed was called the Science and Art of Nursing. Is the article that I wrote about it. It was a first year seminar-based learning community that supported our first-year nursing students at KSU. And so my article kind of outlines some of the lessons I learned along the way as I designed the learning community, what worked, what didn't work, and specifically, how can you use an integrative assignment to design a learning community. So let's talk a little bit about what a learning community is. So learning communities are considered one of the 11 research-based high impact practices that are recognized by the AAC&U. And these high impact practices that we've been talking about throughout the conference increase student retention, engagement, and persistence. And engaging in high impact practices like learning communities requires student effort and commitment to their learning. So they can really help students, as Morgan mentioned, build some of those relationships with peers and faculties and bring communities closer to them so they don't feel like that tiny little fish in this big pond. And they also allow for self-reflection. So they come in many different shapes and sizes, and they can be a little bit difficult to define, but we can often think of learning communities as a collaborative context for learning in which a group of people is organized into a cohort to actively share common learning experiences. So Morgan, what was your experience with this high impact practice?
Well, I have to say with the learning community, it gave me a lot of time for self-reflection. I even still self-reflect today on some of the things that I did during the learning community, but the collaborative nature of it, I mean, we as a group, we worked together on projects. We also volunteered in the community. We immersed ourselves in different cultural experiences. And so it's interesting to see how interconnected it really was. I don't really think as a student I noticed that, but after like looking back and after talking with you about the behind the scenes of the learning communities, I've definitely seen how intentional all of our activities and assignments and opportunities were.
That's wonderful. Yeah, So the goal of learning communities is to really provide the students the opportunity to ask those big questions that you were engaged with, Morgan, and to extend learning beyond the classroom. So learning communities should really allow for that collaboration and deep engagement with material and provide supportive relationships, like we said, between the faculty and the students that often foster these lifelong connections that you're talking about to both the material and to each other. Learning communities also connect students with what they're learning to real life experiences, which we know is such an impactful practice. And by their nature and design, learning communities often incorporate many other high impact practices that Morgan's going to talk a little bit more about later on, such as capstone courses, or capstone projects, collaborative assignments and projects, common intellectual experiences, diversity and global learning, the incorporation of a partnership, typically with a first year seminar, as was the case with both my own learning community and Morgan's, and a service learning or community-based learning experience, and sometimes even undergraduate research, which I focused on in my learning community at KSU. So that being said, I'd like to also talk about the different types of learning communities. So the Washington Center is the nation's leader in researching learning communities. And there are 5 different typologies that are commonly associated with the learning community. So we'll go over each one of those now. In a linked courses learning community, which is often, I think, the most common one that you'll see, we have cohorts of students who are enrolled in 2 or more courses that are led by different faculty members. And through an integrative assignment and or assessment, these linked courses share common learning outcomes and intentionally integrate the curriculum. These are typically not residentially based communities. They're organized more around academic content area. The second type we see is a coordinated studies program. So this is where courses are thematically linked to fulfill a full semester or even longer course schedule. Courses are typically team taught by 2 or more faculty, highly collaborative experience, and some institutions even register students for either a single course of like 8 to 16 credit hours, or students will register for multiple courses within that learning community. So Morgan, can you talk to us a little bit more about your experiences with a coordinated studies program at KSU?
Absolutely. And I'll have to say, before this presentation, I didn't know there were all these different types of learning communities. And it wasn't until we were talking about this that I realized, wow, we were a coordinated studies program. We didn't live together, but we did have 3 classes that we shared. It was a business course, a KSU 1111 like freshman seminar course, and then a English course. And all 3 of those professors, they were all different, but they all sat down together and planned an integrated assignment where it all led to our international trip, and our first year was to Brazil. And so in the business course, we looked at the business side of things because we knew when we were going to Brazil, we were going to go into some businesses. So we wanted to have some background knowledge on that. On the English side, we did some background research on different topics that we'd be investigating and immersing ourselves into in the trip. And then we also, in the KSU 1111, kind of got the background and the history of why things are the way that they are now, what's going on, and kind of current events. And all 3 of them prepared us so that we could be very knowledgeable when we got there, and then we could be more reflective and kind of look at things through a different lens than just someone going there for the first time, because it is a little bit of a culture shock. It's much different than here. So to kind of give us a little bit of a heads up, it was really interesting. And then as far as us as students, we all took those classes together so that we would stay together with those in that program. And ours was a 2-year program. So our first year we had those 3 classes together, and then our second year was only 1 class together.
That sounds like such an amazing experience. And you could definitely tell that your professors required a lot of collaboration in order to make that happen. The next typology is a living learning community, and this is where students typically live together in a residence hall. They can either engage in integrated academic content through integrated curriculum offered by co-curricular coursework or programming, or they can also participate in the learning community through the residential life aspect of it. So that's where we might see collaboration between residence life and student affairs, bringing in engaging activities for the students, maybe in addition to some sort of academic integration as well. The fourth type, which is I think probably not as commonly seen, is called a residential college learning community. And this is where live-in faculty plays an integral role in the programmatic experience and leadership of the learning community. And this also requires a lot of collaboration between academic departments, academic affairs, student affairs. And you'll often see kind of like other types of learning communities brought into this model. So you might have a linked course format as well, intentional curricular and co-curricular programming, and maybe additional social events that are aligned with this model as well. And then the last one, just to kind of point out, is the beauty of learning communities is that they're flexible and can be tailor-made to fit the needs of your student population. So as Morgan talked about some of her experiences and how it set her up for a volunteer experience that she would be involved in, my learning communities also were targeted to certain student populations, so my nursing students. And this typology doesn't really capture all these different ways that you can create a learning community and how learning can be really impactful through a learning community. But these are our most common examples. If you want to start thinking about these typologies, if you're thinking about designing your own learning community. So moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the integrative assignment. And Morgan alluded to this a little bit earlier, and she's going to go more into detail about what she did in her PEGS learning community. But through my own work at KSU with creating my own learning communities, it's really important to understand the role of the integrative assignment, which is often considered the fabric of learning communities, especially when we think about the linked course typology. So when integrative assignments are done properly, they create thematic deep learning experiences like Morgan is discussing, in which students understand the connections of what they're learning and they can apply that to the real world. So in essence, the integrative assignment really helps students connect the dots. According to Lerner and Molniark 2008, the integrative assignment provides students with curricular coherence, integrative high quality learning, and collaborative knowledge construction and skills and knowledge that are relevant to living in a complex, messy, and diverse world. So Morgan, what was your experience with the integrative assignment?
So we talked about the different kind of the theme of the assignments, but I'll have to say that that was integrated with our trip, but then we also, we knew at the end of our trip, we were going to present to the president of the university and to the deans. And so as we went along, we were collecting pieces of evidence and from our own experiences. So then when we got back, we could all work on this collaborative presentation with our group that we gave during our freshman year to the president and the dean to show what we learned, the impact that we had when we went to Brazil, and what we were able to take away from that experience and how we grew as students through the whole first year learning community. So, we did a lot of things that were collaborative and working together just through like smaller assignments in each class, but they all kind of had that underlying theme that they had weaved in from, the business side, the writing side, and then from the historical, more current event side of things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's such a great opportunity. A lot of first year students or second year students don't get the opportunity to meet with higher officials in the university and get to showcase, the great work that you guys did in that learning community. So that sounded like such a wonderful experience. So when we talk about designing a learning community, Lerner and Molniark 2008 also have a 7-step heuristic. And I actually use this to design the learning community that I create at KSU. And we want to think about back to that integrative assignment again. So when we're thinking about, if you're thinking about designing a learning community, what do you think the integrative assignment should look like? So how is it going to draw that theme? How is it going to create those meaningful connections to what you want students to be learning to real world experiences? The second step in thinking about designing a learning community would be thinking very carefully about the shared learning outcomes that the integrative assignment will target, especially if you're doing a linked course format. you're going to want to make sure that the learning outcomes between those two courses really mesh and jive with each other. And you have to think about how are you going to be able to assess that. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But something that we often think about when we're designing a learning community is also ways that we can involve interaction with the community. So Morgan highlighted her study abroad trip and some other volunteer experiences that she's going to talk about more later as well. But often, like we said before, learning communities really tie in those other high impact practices, such as service learning or community-based learning. So how would you involve interaction with the community in this particular learning community? And another thing to think about is what will students need to do to prepare for the integrative assignment. We often want to think about universal design for learning and DEI principles when we're developing curriculum for our students. And particularly in a learning community, we want to kind of reduce barriers to learning and make sure that students have access to be able to participate in this learning community and fulfill this integrative assignment without the need of additional resources from the students. So that's something that you want to think carefully about as you design a learning community. And back to assessment, when we talk about those shared learning outcomes, we want to make sure that it jives and fits really, really well with the content of both your course and whoever else you're working with. This can be challenging sometimes if you have students who are not only in the learning community cohort in your class. So if it's a mixed class, you want to think carefully about how you can make this integrative assignment meaningful, who is required to complete the assignment, and so forth. So there's some thought that needs to go into that particular process. And Morgan talked a lot about reflective practices and how she uses those reflective practices even in her own teaching, which is a hallmark of a good educator. And so one thing that we want students who are engaging in the learning community is to assess their growth in their learning. And part of that also goes to how will they disseminate that? Like, so is it going to be in a conference? Are they going to present to the dean or the president of the university? What are ways that students can showcase and reflect on their experiences in the learning community?
And I'll have to say, as a student in a learning community, I had no idea that all this was going on in the background, that it's very intentional and it's very impressive. And I definitely see the benefits of it. Being a product of a learning community, I can see how those different intentional assignments played an impact in getting us prepared and creating those high impact practices, giving us experiences in those high impact practices for us, and it made a difference.
Yeah. That's great. And kudos to you for participating in it, because not every student is willing to put themselves out there and do that. So seeking out those opportunities are really, really important too.
Absolutely. And so I can say that from experience in the short term, like I was talking about earlier, big pond, little fish. So it created that really unique student experience and that student opportunity in the short term. It allowed me networking experience with professors and colleagues that I wouldn't normally have the opportunity to, nor as a freshman wanting to go up to a professor and be like, hey, this is who I am. That's kind of intimidating to some. And so I felt that it made me feel more comfortable having networked and worked with professors as well and companies, and then giving us a lot of skills-based instruction that others would not necessarily be provided or have opportunities to do. Like I did a whole 30-minute seminar on how to be an active listener. And that's a really important skill that you need to have as a leader. And we had leadership workshops where different guest speakers would come in and teach us in our freshman and sophomore years. And so that's something that I think sets us apart as well. And then it provides a community and a support group who are all goal focused. And I can definitely see that with the people in these pictures. I'm so friends with a lot of them today. And we had that community as a freshman, which is so important to have a core group that you can go to and rely on and that are going through similar experiences with you. And then I know a lot of people actually made career choices based off of some of the activities that we did. Or maybe change their career choices after they've thought they were going one direction and then went to another. For me, it just further solidified that I wanted to be a teacher, and here I am. So it was something that really got you thinking about more than just, hey, we're doing this activity, this assignment. It really impacted your future. And then in terms of volunteer opportunities, we gave back to the community. We helped at soup kitchens. When we were in Costa Rica, we helped build a women's shelter, and we also volunteered at a children's home more locally. And so we had these different opportunities to engage and give back to the community that, really made a difference in our community and the areas that we were going. As well as, when we were traveling, we were able to give back when we were traveling as well. So it wasn't just that we were there on business and, for a trip. When we were learning, we were immersing ourselves into the culture. We went to business meetings, we toured factories, we sat in on government meetings as well, just to give us that, to kind of immerse, put us into that experience and give us a wide view of the area that we were visiting, so we could go back and reflect of how different, how it changed and what we were studying and how it related. And then, like I mentioned a minute ago, we got to present on our experience to the dean and the president. So that was something we were just talking about, is not something that first year students usually get an opportunity to do.
That's wonderful. That sounds so rewarding for you. So what are some of your experiences long term?
So as far as the long term goes, well, my friends, we're still friends, and we still have these shared experiences that we talk about, and new experiences that we've made together. And then the opportunities, I do not think I would have the opportunities that I've had today without this learning community, because it did set me apart. It did give me those skills that, leadership skills, public speaking skills, listening skills, all sorts of things that you don't really think about. But when you go to apply for a job and write stuff on your resume, it really sets you apart from others. And this is what's going to, help you with that. And, you can see in the bottom picture there, I'm teaching English to an elementary school classroom in Costa Rica. And that was, obviously something I really enjoy because I'm a teacher today. But I can see that, just my experiences from that to where I am today teaching in my classroom. I teach high school, AP US history. And so this is something that, I can definitely see pieces of the learning community playing into what I teach and how I teach. But then also me as a professional, I can still see the impact that it's had. And as I reflect and look back on, ways that I've changed and grown as a teacher, it all goes back to starting here with the learning communities.
That's wonderful. So speaking of leadership opportunities and preparing our students for the future, we're really excited. I'm going to be bringing a learning community to Reinhardt University with one of the partners who is also presenting on the conference for CITEL, Dr. Donna Little, who is an English professor here at Reinhardt University. And we are kickstarting our first ever Women in Leadership Learning Community. We're really excited to be doing this coming up in the fall 2022 semester. It'll be a year-long learning community. At least we're going to start with that. We might extend it to 2 years as Morgan's experience. It's going to be a linked course. So my first year seminar course will be linked to Dr. Donna Little's course. We're going to have some integrative assignments that are going to carry our theme throughout the course, which is walk the path that has been laid out for you with grace. The theme was actually chosen by some of our current Letty Pate Whitehead scholars, and our Letty Pate Whitehead scholars that are incoming for fall 2022 will be eligible to participate in this learning community. We're targeting this particular group of women because the Letty Pate Whitehead Scholarship Foundation is a needs-based scholarship. So it works with our students who need a little bit extra support. And we're excited to support these students in ways to develop them into leaders, to understand their role as women, not only in the institution, but in society, to really develop a sense of community with them, and to help them see themselves as leaders and kind of reduce that barrier to thinking that I'm not capable of being a leader. Like I mentioned before, we're going to do that through some integrative assignments, such as journaling. We're going to do something called Build This Journal, which is kind of similar to Wreck This Journal, if you're familiar with that. But we're going to have students journal throughout the semester, and we'll have some shared journal prompts between our classes. And we're also going to be having students reflect on what their female experience is through literature in their English course. They'll have a composition paper, and they will also be thinking about their leadership experiences while moving through this learning community. So we're really excited to be bringing that to Reinhardt University this year.
That is awesome. That sounds such a wonderful experience and opportunity. I can't wait to see how it grows and develops. And so while you're doing that, it makes me think, well, you usually think of learning communities in, college and in higher education, but there are ways, and as we learned, there's not one way to have a learning community, but there are ways that you can integrate that in high school and middle school and through, secondary education. And so for me, I think, a lot of my examples will be from my experience through social studies and AP US history. But for you, just insert whatever subject you teach there and it'll apply. So with the advanced placement courses, I teach AP US history, and together we all work towards doing well on the AP exams. We create a little community around that. And so I can see it very easily transpiring into more of a learning community because we do spend time in class discussing. We have some outside study sessions that we get together and discuss that. And then you could even create like small group study groups, and maybe even kind of expanding upon that with some community experience or involvement, maybe at the historical society, or some sort of extra opportunity to get them engaged in the content, but also creating that learning community aspect of it, especially if you're the only one who teaches the AP course, or if you have another colleague in the district or in your school, you could also connect together as well. And kind of piggybacking off of that as well is by subject. I know for us as teachers, we're in professional learning communities, PLCs, where we get together as world history teachers or US history teachers, and we could have our students get together for some sort of culminating experience or assignment that they're all working on, and maybe they could get together to do that, or have the whole subject area volunteer at a place. It could definitely be molded and adapted to fit that mold as well. And then probably where I see the learning communities fitting in best, at least from my experience, is with the clubs or honor societies. For me, I run and am the advisor of Rho Kappa National Social Studies Honor Society, and we meet once a month and we have volunteer experiences. Every student's in a committee where they are doing some sort of social studies activity, whether it's we run trivia every month. At our school, we have daily announcements that go out, and then we also are going to start volunteering more into the community through historical centers and museums and things like that. So this kind of gives us a community outreach, and I could definitely see that even becoming more of a learning community, because usually those students, I have juniors and seniors in there, and they could help each other out as far as like study sessions, but also being peer mentors as well. And you could see that also in advanced placement courses and by subject. You could have, older students peer mentoring younger students, and especially with AP World and AP US, the skills that they learn are very similar. So you could literally have a peer mentorship and even get more students involved in some sort of learning community. But the big thing is, allowing a place for students to create opportunities to help each other and the community. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway. So it can look very different and be done a variety of different ways, but these are just some of my experiences of what that can look like. So as we're wrapping up here, what new adventures are awaiting you and your students? Think about what we've talked about today, and how you can take this and bring it into your own classroom, into your own studies, and what that's going to look like for you. So it's very exciting to see what's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed the benefits of learning communities and our personal experiences, either as a student in them and now as a teacher, or as a faculty member designing learning communities. And they really are a beneficial practice, a high impact practice. So we encourage you, if you have the opportunity to create a learning community, to think about ways that you can revisit your curriculum and see if there's room for a learning community in your program. And if not, like Morgan mentioned, what are ways that you can translate these high impact practices that we often see in learning communities into your curriculum, and how can you kind of replicate some of these ideas into your own teaching? So on that note, we'd like to end with a couple of discussion questions that we will follow up with you later. So again, at this time, if you would pause the video and respond to the following questions. So if you're a Reinhardt faculty member, do you want to start a learning community? And if so, in what area? How can we assist you with making this happen here at CITEL?
And for educators, as an educator, how do you see this, the idea of learning communities fitting into your school?
And we look forward to following up to your responses after the conference. So on behalf of CITEL, sorry, Morgan.
No, you go right ahead.
We'd love to collaborate with you. We've included our contact information here. Morgan, what would you like to say about that?
I was just going to say thank you so much. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow me there. And of course, we both have our LinkedIn and our email address, but we would just love to hear from you, share your stories, your successes, questions, and we're always game for collaboration. So if you want to reach out, we are happy to help you get this started, because it is so impactful and it makes such a difference in students' lives.
Yes, thank you so much. On behalf of CITEL, thank you for watching this presentation. We'd like to conclude with just highlighting some of the references that we talked about during this presentation. So our theme for this conference is high impact practices. So if you want to learn more about that, if you haven't learned enough about it in this conference, you can check out the AAC&U's website on high impact practices linked here. For more information about the heuristic, the 7-step heuristic for creating a learning community and designing the integrative assignment, you can check out Lardner and Molniar's 2008 article. You can also check out my article, The Science and Art of Nursing, where I discuss some of the lessons I learned, some cautions that you might have when you're designing your own learning community. And then finally, like I mentioned before, one of the greatest resources for learning communities is the Washington Center. And if you just Google them or follow this link, there's lots of resources there for you to assist you with getting started in learning communities. So thank you once again. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.